F3, starting with the strategic management. Then we're going to go through F3, and we then close it off with P3. So the idea is to just understand how all these three fit in together. So one, we have what, when it comes to the strategic, this is what you will be exposed to. And for me, this is very important because that's where the learning starts. So you will be exposed to the strategy process. How do you set a strategy? What are the different strategic approaches? There's the rational model, emergent model, so different strategies at different value. So that is what we're going to spend 15% of our time on. Then we're going to go and analyze organizational ecosystems. This is something that if you didn't do management level will be a very new concept. So we will then start you where you probably have missed because we have done the management level. So you will not need to say, can I buy the textbook for management level? No. We will then help you to understand what is an ecosystem and therefore how do you analyze organizational ecosystems. Then we're going to talk about generating strategic options. How do you generate strategic options? And this will be very important because you will need to understand that there is what they call a niche strategy, a core strategy, and be able to set yourself apart and be clear about how you will win in a particular market. Then we will talk about making strategic choices, how to evaluate strategies that are before you. Before you say yes, what do you look at? So we'll expose you to things like the SAFE model, strategy, suitability, acceptability, feasibility, and ethical perspective. This will be very crucial, even if you decide to pursue further the APC, because we find that the CIMA candidates are very strong when it comes to strategy because of this particular module. So you will then be well placed. You will have enough time to then immerse yourself in all these things I'm talking about. And during classes, we'll give real life examples so that you can better connect with the content. Then the strategic control is to say, once strategy has been implemented, how do we know we are winning? So we then talk about things like KPIs, and we then talk about things like critical success factors and how to go about evaluating them. Then lastly, we then say strategy cannot exist outside digital technologies that have come to immense this particular environment. So that's what Msizi will then unpack and do for you right then. Then in terms of how you will then, or your material, what will your material have? So your material will have this table right here. So this table will just help in just reminding you what you need to know. Because sometimes when you've got all these things, you are like, wait, where am I? So this table will be there in your what? In your notes, where it will then say, here we are starting. When we're talking about strategy process, what are we saying? So they're saying, for instance, strategy is at the heart of what organizations do. This section provides the foundation of strategic management for the organization. It introduces the strategy process that is elaborated on in the rest of the subject. So you need to know what you need to know. That's where we're going to start. Then we talk about organizational ecosystem. And this is where we're going to tell you about the mentality of having an ecosystem and how to think about from just your traditional system where everyone is an adversary, but to think about it as everyone is a market participant and you are trying to work together and make sure you adapt as well as what evolve in order to survive and thrive. So that is what we are all about there. So generic strategy, but as you can see, it is very important that you understand where everything fits in. And the information that is out there can be too much. So our role is quite simple. We want it to be presented in a meaningful way where you are able to do it, where you are able to get the very best out of this journey. We are not only focused on the exam, but we are recognizing that some of you might not necessarily to do another exam, but you are doing it because maybe you want to run your own business. You want to be able to develop strategies and you want to be able to know and find your passion maybe outside the numbers. Because as much as we might say we are all CAs, we might have different passions. We don't want all of us to be, say, auditors. We all don't want to be preparers of financial statements, but we might want to say we want to help companies grow. We want to be problem solvers. We want to be X. So we then have this particular qualification and this particular module to get you there. So it's not just going to be about exam and ticking the boxes, but it will also be about an enjoyable learning experience. Then, as I've mentioned, the other aspects are making strategic choices, strategic control, as well as digital strategies. So those are what I call sections. So the other thing I've not spoken about so far, it is what they refer to as weightings. So you'll then see that this syllabus E3 has got 6 sections. It's got A to F. You need to know all of them. But you might be saying that, okay, if I'm to split my time, how much time do I need to dedicate? So they're saying about this syllabus, this section A, accounts for about 15% of the syllabus. And then the biggest chunk, you'll see that it's all about analyzing organizational ecosystem as well as strategic control. So those are some of your biggest elements. So 40% is coming from 2 topics. So even from a planning and the content we're going to have, you will find that we'll spend a little bit more time there. Whereas the others, yes, will have specific objectives as guided by the section overview that we'll want to make sure we have achieved before we move on. But those are just sections. When you go to your textbook, they're split into what? They're split into topics. And there will be quite a lot of overlap because as we read, strategy process, it's all about unpacking what you're going to be covering later on. So it will then be very important for you to be able to appreciate the overlap, that some of the things we might have put them here, but they could be affecting other stuff. So for instance, strategy process, there are 2 topics under it in your Kaplan textbook. There is the strategy process and generating what? Strategic options. Then when it comes to, say, analyzing the organizational ecosystem, then there are 4 topics that we need to go through, which makes sense because it accounts for 20% of the syllabus. The same with E3, section E, strategy control. It's got 3 topics. So clearly those are the dominant things that we need to be mindful of. So this module therefore has 13 topics that we need to make sure we go through. Then now, how do we then go through? How do we know we are winning? Then CIMA even more brilliant. They've got something like this. Think about it like an examinable pronouncement or a scope, kind of. So here it is then saying that you've got what do we call a lead outcome. So in a lead outcome, it just tells you what you should be able to do when you complete a particular section. Like this is coming from section B, analyzing of organizational ecosystems. So when you look at organizational ecosystems, they are saying you should be able to analyze the elements of the ecosystem. What do you mean? Then they clarify that it means that you should be able to analyze markets and competition, as well as society and regulation. Then what are the topics do I need to know? I need to know SWOT, pastel, competitor analysis. I need to know customer analysis and wider ecosystems, as well as industry ecosystem. So I need to know all that. Then if I'm to break it down and just talk about it from a conversation kind of perspective to explain what I need to know, is that I need to understand what types of market, because they just said analyze markets, but what do you mean? So I will need to understand what type of markets do organizations operate in. I will need to understand the rules of the games in those markets. What are the regulations? Like for instance, in higher education in South Africa, you need a license to operate. So those are some of the rules of the game. In some instances, we know BEE is very important, like in the mining sector. Those are the rules of the game. You need significant capital to win. Those are the rules of the game, and so on. What are the sources and opportunity for a disruption in the market? How does society regulate the markets and provide permission to play for organization? Seeing that so many businesses have fallen and some have thrived. So some could be just a matter of what society expects. I mean, some of the biggest names that we've seen not doing so well are, from a reputation perspective, Bell Pollinger, what is it? Oh, I forgot the name. But it's that reputation where now it was linked to the Gupta scandals back in the days, and it just disappeared from the face of the what of the earth, because society deemed that such an organization is not fit for us to deal business with. So that's what we mean when we say society regulates the market and provide permission. Sometimes they do it more formally through laws and regulations that are adapted in order to respond to some of those issues. Then now you might say, oh, okay, it's starting to make sense. But if I'm to explain to an employer my skills now, what am I saying? What will then the objective test help me to do? So the objective test will then help me to be able to do one, perform or review a SWOT analysis to analyze an organization's internal and external options related to the overall strategy. For instance, I need to prepare or review a Potter's Five Forces analysis to analyze an organization's competition. So these are the things that we'll be doing and mastering. So I will want us to go through this journey very intimately and get to learn and take away as much as possible. So this is what we call a representative task. So under each topic, we have this. So this just keeps us in check to say, yeah, we are going to tell you about this, but how do we bring it home? So this is how we will then bring it home. Okay, so that is how each of these modules are what are essentially structured and how it works. So what are we going to be doing here? This content area will then clarify that. Then where will our focus be? The weighting. And where will then be what? the coverage for each, then the overview, and the topics, as well as the outcomes, being the lead outcome and the component outcome, and finally, the representative task in the objective test. So when you prepare an objective test, this is your kind of a checklist. So we'll be checking through this in the lectures and just making sure that everything is what is intact. So that is essentially the expectation right here. So that's E3. I don't know if there are any questions before I hand over to what to Manda to talk through his F3 module. All right, so no questions. Okay. Yeah, sure.